Everyone abandoned the alien girl, except the human soldier who saved her. HFY sci-fi story. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into the story. Have you ever wondered what it means to be truly abandoned? Imagine being left behind, surrounded by nothing but danger and isolation. That's exactly what happened to an alien girl, and it would take one human soldier to change everything. Let's go back to where it all began. The wind howled across the desolate battlefield, the chill of the alien planet cutting through the worn fabric of Sergeant Alex Carter's jacket. The conflict was over. The enemy had been defeated, but at a cost. His team had cleared the area, the last of the alien forces scattered into the cold night. But something was off. Through the fog of war, a figure emerged, her features blurred by the haze. She was a young alien girl, no older than 18 Earth years, with pale blue skin and silver hair that shimmered faintly under the broken moonlight. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear and confusion. She stumbled, trying to stand, but collapsed again. She was alone, abandoned. The rest of his squad had already moved on. Orders were clear: leave no one behind, but also leave no witnesses. This alien girl, her kind responsible for the destruction of countless human colonies, should have been left to fend for herself. But Alex Carter was different. He wasn't like the rest of his team. He didn't see an enemy. He saw a person in need. With a deep breath, he approached her, his boots crunching in the snow. "Hey," he said softly, crouching beside her. She flinched at the sound of his voice, eyes darting around as though she expected to be attacked. "Don't worry, I'm not here to hurt you." The alien girl didn't respond. She could barely move, her legs twisted in an unnatural angle, a result of the earlier conflict. Alex could see the blood staining her clothes, the hopelessness in her eyes. "Can you hear me?" he asked again, more urgently now. She nodded weakly, but the fear in her eyes didn't fade. Alex's mind raced. He was a soldier, trained for battle, not for saving enemy lives. But this wasn't about enemies or allies anymore. This was about doing what was right. "I'm not leaving you here," he said, his voice firm. She looked at him, the suspicion in her eyes slowly giving way to something else, curiosity. But before Alex could make another move, a distant sound reached his ears, a noise that made his blood run cold. The low hum of enemy ships approaching. They weren't done with this planet yet. Alex knew they couldn't stay here, not with the enemy closing in. Without thinking, he gently lifted the alien girl into his arms, her frail body trembling in the cold. "Hold on tight," he said, his grip firm but careful. "I'm getting you out of here." The next few minutes felt like an eternity. The sound of the enemy ships grew louder, closer. Every step Alex took felt like a countdown to death, but he couldn't leave her. Not now. Not when she needed him. As they moved, the girl's breath was shallow, her head resting weakly against his shoulder. Alex pushed forward, his legs burning with every step, but he couldn't stop. Not when he was so close. He had to keep moving. He had to save her. And finally, after what seemed like an impossible journey, they reached the outskirts of the old military outpost. The safety of the base was within reach, but the enemy wasn't far behind. Just as Alex was about to set the girl down to find cover, the sound of a high-pitched screech filled the air. The ships. They had found them. Alex's heart pounded in his chest. He knew they didn't have much time. But just as hope seemed to fade, the girl stirred. With a strength Alex hadn't expected, she pulled herself from his arms and stood on her own, her silver eyes locking onto him with a mix of gratitude and awe. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice weak but full of emotion. Alex nodded, relief washing over him. He had done it. He had saved her. And in doing so, he had shown the world that humanity wasn't just about surviving. It was about doing the right thing, even when it seemed impossible. The enemy might have abandoned her, but Alex Carter had proven that one human soldier could make all the difference. As Alex continued to move through the outpost with Vera in his arms, he could hear the thumping of enemy ships growing louder. His heart raced, but his grip on the alien girl tightened. He wasn't going to let her down. He couldn't. The pain in his legs from running for so long began to set in, but he ignored it. The cold was biting, but he could barely feel it anymore. All he could focus on was getting Vera to safety. They were close now, just a few more steps, and they would be inside the secure compound. But the screech of approaching ships reminded him that time was running out. The enemy wasn't far behind. Alex could see the shadow of the gates ahead, the entrance to the military base. He pushed forward, his legs threatening to give out with every step. He was almost there. Almost. The sound of footsteps behind him made his heart drop. The enemy had found them. Alex turned sharply, bracing himself to defend Vera. But as he turned, he saw the ships not aiming at them but landing in the distance. Far away, too far to be of any immediate danger. For a moment, his heart stopped racing. They weren't being pursued. Not yet. Vera, still weak, looked up at him with gratitude in her eyes. "I thought I was going to die," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Alex shook his head. "Not on my watch," he replied softly, trying to catch his breath. "Let's get inside. You're safe now." He carried her through the gates of the compound and into a small medical bay where soldiers rushed to help. They set Vera down on a cot, and the medical team immediately began tending to her injuries. Alex stayed by her side, watching as they worked to patch her up. His mind was still racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that the situation was far from over. Just when things seemed to settle, an officer walked into the room, his expression grim. "Carter," he said, addressing Alex. "You've done good work, but the command needs to speak with you. It's about the girl." Alex stood, his muscles aching from the exertion, and followed the officer down the hallway. He couldn't help but wonder what they wanted with Vera. What would they do to her now that she was in their custody? The door to the command center slid open, and Alex stepped inside. The room was filled with high-ranking officers, all focused on a large holographic display showing the planet's surface. At the center of the table stood a figure, tall and imposing, with dark hair and a stern look on his face. "Carter," the man said, his voice low. "I hope you understand the gravity of the situation." Alex nodded. "I do, sir. But the girl, she needed help. I couldn't just leave her out there." The officer studied him for a moment before responding. "You've done well, but that's not the issue here. We've just learned that the alien girl you rescued is no ordinary civilian. She's a key figure in their government, a princess, and the last surviving heir to their throne." Alex's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea who she was. He had just seen a young girl in need of help. "What does this mean for her?" he asked. The officer's gaze hardened. "It means she's important. Her life is worth more than you can imagine. If we protect her, we could use her as leverage to bring about peace with the alien faction. But it also makes her a target. She's in danger now more than ever." Alex ran a hand through his hair, the weight of the situation settling in. "So what's the plan?" he asked, his voice steady. The officer nodded to a nearby console, and the screen flickered to life, showing a diagram of the alien faction's military forces. "We're going to use her to negotiate. You'll be part of the team assigned to protect her at all costs. Do you understand?" Alex didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir." As he walked back to Vera's side, the reality of the situation hit him. This wasn't just about saving one life anymore. This was about something much bigger, something that could change the course of the war. He had made a promise to her, and now he had to see it through, no matter what the cost. Vera looked up at him as he entered the room, her eyes still filled with a mix of gratitude and confusion. She didn't know who he was, but she knew one thing for sure. He had saved her life. And in doing so, he had changed everything. The door to the medical bay opened, and another officer walked in. "Sergeant Carter," the officer said, "we need you for a briefing. The alien forces are regrouping, and we have a new objective." Alex nodded, his resolve hardening. He wasn't going to let Vera or anyone else down. He had made it this far, and he wasn't stopping now. Alex stood in the briefing room, his gaze fixed on the tactical display as the officer outlined their new mission. Vera, still recovering from her injuries, sat quietly in the corner, her eyes flicking between Alex and the officers. The weight of what he had done was beginning to settle on him. Saving her was no longer just about compassion or doing what was right. It was about something much bigger. As the officers spoke about their new objective, Alex could feel the tension in the room rise. They were going to use Vera as leverage in negotiations with the alien faction, but that also meant they would be putting her in even more danger. We need you to escort her to the negotiation table, the officer said, breaking through Alex's thoughts. We'll be sending a team to secure the area, but your primary mission is to ensure her safety. Do not let anyone, enemy or ally, get to her. Alex nodded, his expression hardening. He had already made a promise to Vera, but now it wasn't just her life he was protecting. It was the future of humanity itself. As he left the briefing room, Alex couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility settle on his shoulders. He walked back to the medical bay, where Vera was still resting, and he found her staring out of the window, her face lost in thought. "How are you feeling?" he asked, stepping into the room. Vera turned to look at him, her eyes still wide with uncertainty. "Better, but..." She hesitated, unsure of how to continue. "I don't understand any of this. Why are you helping me? I'm just an alien." Alex smiled softly, walking over to her side. "You're more than just an alien," he said. "You're a person, and you needed help. That's all there is to it." Vera's eyes softened, and she gave him a small nod. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Alex placed a hand gently on her shoulder, offering a reassuring squeeze. "You don't have to worry about that anymore," he said. "We'll get you through this." Vera nodded again, her gaze falling to the floor. Alex could tell she was still processing everything that had happened, still grappling with the enormity of the situation. But he could also see the trust beginning to build between them. He wasn't just her rescuer anymore. He was her protector. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparations. The base was on high alert, with soldiers scrambling to get everything ready for the mission. Alex found himself at the forefront of the operation, leading the charge to the negotiation table where Vera would play her role. He knew that if things went wrong, it would be on him. As they prepared to leave the base, Alex walked up to Vera one last time. "You ready?" he asked. Vera looked up at him, her expression determined. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied. Alex smiled, nodding. "Good. Let's go." The journey to the negotiation site was tense, with every step feeling like a countdown to something monumental. Vera remained silent beside him, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Alex couldn't blame her. He was doing the same. As they approached the designated area, Alex's heart began to pound. He could feel the presence of enemy forces nearby, and he knew it was only a matter of time before they made their move. He had to be ready. As they reached the negotiation site, Alex positioned himself between Vera and the rest of the room, his hand hovering near his sidearm. He wasn't about to let anyone get too close to her. The doors opened, and the alien delegation entered, led by a towering figure with bright green skin and sharp, angular features. The tension in the room was palpable as the two sides prepared to face each other. But it wasn't the alien leaders that caught Alex's attention. It was the unmistakable glint of a weapon in one of the guards' hands. He didn't have much time to react. In a split second, Alex moved, stepping in front of Vera and knocking her to the ground as a shot rang out. The room erupted into chaos. Alex's instincts kicked in, and he immediately began to return fire, taking down the threat before it could escalate further. "Get down," he shouted to Vera, pulling her behind a nearby table for cover. The gunfire continued to ring out, but Alex's focus remained entirely on protecting Vera. She was his responsibility, and nothing was going to change that. As the firefight raged on, Alex could hear Vera's soft breathing beside him. She was scared, but she trusted him. That trust, that bond, was something he wasn't going to let go of. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the gunfire stopped. The room fell silent, and Alex slowly raised his head above the table. He could see that the alien delegation had been neutralized, but there was still no sign of victory. The mission was far from over, but Alex knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let anyone harm Vera. Not now, not ever. As the dust began to settle, Alex carefully helped Vera to her feet, his eyes scanning the room for any more threats. The chaos had subsided, but the tension was far from over. The alien delegation had been neutralized, but this wasn't a victory, not yet. Vera, still shaken from the gunfire, looked up at Alex with a mixture of fear and gratitude. "Are we safe now?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Alex glanced at her, offering a reassuring nod, though he didn't feel as certain as he wanted to sound. "For now," he replied, his voice steady, but inside, he could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They weren't out of danger. Not by a long shot. He moved quickly, scanning the surroundings and making sure the area was secure. He could hear the faint sound of approaching footsteps, and without hesitation, he motioned for Vera to follow him. "We need to move," he said, his tone urgent. Vera nodded, still too rattled to speak, and followed closely behind him. As they moved through the hallways of the facility, Alex kept his eyes peeled for any signs of enemy movement. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The negotiation site had been attacked, and that could only mean one thing. The alien faction wasn't willing to back down so easily. As they reached a secure room, Alex quickly sealed the door behind them. He checked the security system, ensuring that they were locked in and safe for the moment. Vera leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. She still hadn't fully recovered from the injuries she sustained in the previous battle, and now the stress of the situation was taking its toll. Alex could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "You all right?" he asked, stepping closer. Vera nodded weakly, but there was something in her gaze, something he couldn't quite place. "I don't understand, Alex. Why are they attacking us? We were supposed to be negotiating peace." Alex sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "I wish I knew. But one thing's clear, they don't want peace. They want control, and you're the key to that control." Vera looked away, her eyes distant. "I never asked for this," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I just wanted to live in peace, to have a chance to make a difference for my people." Alex moved closer, his expression softening. "You didn't ask for any of this, Vera. But you're here now, and you've got people who are willing to help you. I'm one of those people. You don't have to face this alone." Vera met his gaze, her eyes searching his face as if trying to find some kind of reassurance. For a moment, there was silence between them, the weight of their situation hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Vera spoke again, her voice firmer this time. "I'm not giving up. I won't let them use me as a pawn." Alex's heart swelled with admiration for her resolve. She had been through so much already, yet she still had the strength to fight. "Good," he said, his voice low but full of conviction. "Because neither will I." He stood up, turning his attention back to the situation at hand. The room was quiet, but Alex knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. The enemy wasn't going to give up easily, and neither was Alex. He had a job to do. He had promised to protect Vera, and he wasn't about to break that promise. As the door to the room slid open, Alex tensed, ready for whatever was coming next. But to his surprise, it wasn't enemy soldiers that entered the room. It was a high-ranking officer, his face grim but determined. "Carter," the officer said, his voice urgent. "We've got a situation. The alien faction has just launched an attack on the outer perimeter. We need to move, now." Alex nodded, his heart pounding. The stakes were higher than ever, and now, the battle for Vera's safety was just beginning. "Let's go," he said, turning back to Vera. She met his gaze, and in that moment, Alex knew that they were both in this together. No matter what happened, they would face it side by side. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the compound as Alex and Vera moved quickly down the narrow corridor, the urgency of the situation thick in the air. Alex's mind raced as they approached the secured transport bay. He had promised Vera he would keep her safe, but now, with the enemy closing in, that promise was becoming harder to keep. The officer who had briefed them earlier was right. Things were escalating faster than they had anticipated. As they reached the transport bay, Alex quickly glanced over at Vera, who was walking close behind him, her steps steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. He could see the determination in her eyes, and it reminded him of why he had to protect her. She was more than just the last hope for peace. She was a symbol of everything humanity was fighting for. "We're almost there," Alex said, his voice calm but filled with urgency. Vera nodded, but there was still an edge of uncertainty in her gaze. "Do you think this will work?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex turned to face her, offering a reassuring smile. "We don't have a choice," he said. "But I'm going to make sure you get out of here safely. That's all that matters right now." Vera's eyes softened, and she gave him a small nod, her trust in him evident. They reached the transport bay, and the officer who had called for them earlier was waiting by the vehicle, flanked by several heavily armed soldiers. "Carter, we need to move out immediately," the officer said, his tone tense. "The enemy is breaching the outer walls. We don't have much time." Alex nodded, and without hesitation, he ushered Vera into the transport. As they climbed aboard, the vehicle's engines roared to life, and the doors slid shut behind them. The atmosphere inside the transport was tense, the soldiers stationed at various points, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. Vera sat quietly next to Alex, her eyes fixed on the digital display in front of them as the vehicle began to move. Outside the window, the battlefield came into view, smoke, fire, and the silhouettes of enemy forces closing in. It was a race against time now, and Alex's heart pounded in his chest. He could feel the pressure building with every passing second. The transport jolted as it hit a rough patch of terrain, but Alex barely noticed. His focus was on keeping Vera safe, ensuring that nothing would happen to her. As they moved through the compound, they encountered more resistance. Explosions rocked the ground, and the sound of gunfire echoed in the distance. The enemy was relentless, but Alex's training kicked in. He gave orders to the soldiers, guiding them through the chaos and keeping them focused on the mission at hand. "We can't stop now," Alex said firmly, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We get Vera out, and then we'll deal with the rest." Vera, still silent beside him, seemed to take comfort in his presence. She had been through so much, and yet here she was, still standing, still fighting. Alex couldn't help but admire her strength. As they approached the extraction point, the transport came under heavy fire. Alex's heart skipped a beat as he saw the flashes of enemy weaponry lighting up the sky. "Brace for impact," he shouted to the crew, pushing Vera down into the seat beside him as the transport lurched violently. The vehicle rocked back and forth, but Alex held firm, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. They were so close. They had to make it. Just as it seemed like the transport might be overwhelmed, a loud explosion rocked the ground, sending a shockwave that knocked the vehicle off course. Alex's instincts took over as he quickly adjusted the controls, steering the transport back on track. "We're almost there," he yelled, his voice full of determination. The enemy was close, but so were they. The extraction point was within reach, and Alex wasn't going to let anything stop them now. As they reached the final stretch, the transport broke through the outer perimeter of the compound, and Alex could see the safe zone in the distance. His heart surged with hope, but it wasn't over yet. The enemy forces were closing in, and they weren't going to give up. Without a fight, Alex gritted his teeth, his grip on the controls tightening. "We're not stopping now," he muttered under his breath. With one final push, he steered the transport toward the safety of the extraction point. The vehicle lurched forward, its speed increasing as it raced toward the safe zone. Behind them, the enemy forces were closing in fast, but Alex knew they couldn't afford to slow down. They had to make it. Finally, with a deafening roar, the transport burst through the final barrier and into the safety of the extraction zone. The vehicle screeched to a halt, and Alex immediately jumped out, pulling Vera with him. They were safe, for now. But Alex knew that this was just the beginning. The fight wasn't over, and the road ahead would be even more dangerous. But he had Vera by his side, and that was all that mattered. They had made it through the first wave, and together, they would face whatever came next. As the transport came to a screeching halt, Alex immediately jumped out, pulling Vera along with him. The safe zone was in sight, but the battle was far from over. His heart was racing, adrenaline pumping through his veins as he scanned the area. They had made it, but the war was still raging around them. Alex looked around quickly, spotting the extraction team that was waiting for them. They had managed to get this far, but the real danger was yet to come. "We're not safe yet," Alex muttered to Vera as they hurried toward the extraction team. Vera, her eyes wide with fear, nodded silently, her grip tight on Alex's arm. She had seen enough violence in the last few hours to last a lifetime. Alex could tell she was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but there was something else in her, something strong, something that refused to give up. That strength was the reason he was going to make sure she made it through this. As they reached the extraction team, Alex turned to one of the soldiers, a tall man with a grim expression. "Get her to safety," Alex said, his voice steady but urgent. "I'll cover you." The soldier nodded, and Vera was immediately ushered into the protective cover of the team. Alex kept his eyes on the battlefield, watching for any sign of movement. The enemy forces were regrouping, and he knew they wouldn't stop until they had captured or killed Vera. But Alex wasn't going to let that happen. He could see the shadows of enemy soldiers moving through the smoke and debris, creeping closer to their position. Without hesitation, Alex dropped to one knee, pulling out his rifle and taking aim. He exhaled slowly, focusing on the target ahead. The gunfire erupted in a quick burst, and an enemy soldier fell to the ground. Alex moved quickly, firing again, his aim steady despite the chaos around him. He wasn't going to let them get close. His mind was laser-focused as he took down another enemy soldier, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. But he wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not when they were so close. The extraction team continued to move forward, pushing toward the extraction point, and Alex covered their advance every step of the way. The sound of gunfire and explosions filled the air, but Alex's focus never wavered. He was determined to see this through. As they reached the extraction point, the enemy forces were closing in fast. The sound of their heavy footsteps echoed in the distance, but Alex wasn't afraid. He had one mission, and he was going to complete it. He moved ahead, stepping in front of the team to make sure Vera and the others were safe. The enemy was closing in, but Alex was ready. As the first enemy soldier appeared on the horizon, Alex took aim once more, his heart calmed despite the chaos. The shot rang out, and the enemy soldier dropped to the ground. But more were coming. The tension in the air was palpable as Alex continued to fire, each shot echoing in the silence between explosions. Vera, now safely behind cover, watched him with wide eyes, her fear momentarily replaced by awe. She had seen Alex in action before, but never like this. He was calm, focused, a protector in the truest sense. As more enemies approached, Alex's determination grew stronger. He wasn't just protecting Vera anymore. He was protecting the future. With every shot he took, every step he took, he knew he was making a difference. The extraction point was within reach, but the enemy wasn't giving up. Alex fired again, taking out another enemy soldier. "We've almost made it," one of the extraction team members shouted, their voice strained. Alex nodded, his eyes never leaving the horizon. He wasn't about to stop now. He pushed forward, covering the team as they made their final push toward the extraction point. The sound of enemy fire grew louder, but Alex didn't falter. He had made a promise, and he was going to keep it. Finally, with one last burst of energy, they reached the extraction zone. Alex could hear the sound of the extraction ship's engines roaring to life, ready to take them to safety. He turned to Vera, who was now standing by his side, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and determination. "We made it," Alex said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. Vera looked at him, her face softening. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Alex smiled, nodding. "We're not done yet," he replied. "But we'll make it through this. Together." With that, the extraction ship took off into the sky, leaving the battlefield behind. The war was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, Alex felt like there was hope. He had Vera by his side, and that was all that mattered. The journey was just beginning. The extraction ship soared through the atmosphere, leaving the battlefield behind them. Alex stood at the window, his hands resting on the cool glass, looking out at the stars. The noise of the engines and the quiet hum of the interior seemed distant as his mind replayed everything that had happened. He had made it, but the war was far from over. Vera stood beside him, her eyes following his gaze out into the vast expanse of space. She didn't speak, but Alex could tell she was deep in thought, processing everything that had happened. He turned to her, noticing how much more vulnerable she seemed now that they were out of immediate danger. The calm was a stark contrast to the chaos they had just escaped. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft. Vera turned to him, her gaze steady but weary. "I don't know," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. "I feel like I'm living in a dream. Everything happened so fast." Alex gave her a small, reassuring smile. "I know it's been overwhelming, but we're safe now. We made it through the worst of it." Vera nodded, her lips pressing together in a thin line. "I'm just trying to wrap my head around it all. I'm supposed to be the one who brings peace, but all I've done is run and hide. I don't know what to do anymore." Alex could see the doubt in her eyes, the uncertainty that she had never shown before. He had seen her as a symbol of hope, but now he could see the weight of the burden she carried. "You didn't ask for any of this, Vera, but you're still here. You're still fighting, and that's what matters," Alex said, his tone firm. And you're not alone. You've got people who care about you. People who want to see this through with you. I'm one of those people. Vera looked at him, her eyes softening. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice filled with emotion. I don't know how to repay you for everything you've done for me. Alex shook his head. You don't have to repay me. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. Because I believe in you, Vera. You're not alone in this fight. Vera smiled, a small, genuine smile. And for the first time in a long while, Alex felt like there was a real sense of hope between them. But the calm didn't last long. The ship jolted suddenly, throwing them both off balance. Alex reached out to steady Vera, but before he could react, the emergency alarms blared. What the hell? Alex muttered under his breath, grabbing for the communication panel. The voice of the ship's captain crackled through the speakers, tense and urgent. We've been hit. Enemy forces are approaching. Brace for impact. The ship shook violently as the first blast hit, sending a shockwave through the hull. Alex's heart raced as he grabbed Vera and pushed her down into a seat, strapping her in. Hold on, he shouted, his voice full of determination. The alarms continued to blare as the ship veered off course, the lights flickering above them. Alex's mind raced. They had just escaped the enemy, but now it seemed like the fight wasn't over. This is not good, he muttered, gripping the seat as the ship bucked again. The communication panel came to life once more. We're losing power, the captain's voice said, sounding strained. We need to make an emergency landing. I don't know if we can. Make it back to the base. Alex's heart sank. The enemy had found them again. They weren't safe. Not yet. Where's the nearest safe zone? Alex demanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. There's a civilian settlement on the planet's surface, the captain replied. It's our only chance. Alex turned to Vera, his expression firm. We have to get there, no matter what. You're not going to be a pawn in their game, Vera. I'm going to make sure of that. Vera nodded, her face set in determination. I'm with you, she said, her voice steady. The ship continued to shake as the enemy fired again, this time closer, but Alex wasn't going to let them stop him. We're going to make it, he said, more to himself than to anyone else. The ship lurched again, but this time, it was different. They were descending. Alex gritted his teeth, watching the ground below as the ship plummeted toward the surface. The enemy forces were closing in, but he wasn't going to let them win. The last burst of energy from the ship's engine slowed their descent just in time, but they hit the surface with a violent jolt, sending everyone flying forward. Alex's vision blurred for a moment, but he shook it off, focusing on the task at hand. Is everyone all right? He called out, his voice firm. Vera was shaken, but she nodded, her eyes wide but resolute. I'm fine, she said, her voice steady. Alex unstrapped himself and moved quickly to the exit, checking for any signs of immediate danger. The ship had crash-landed on the outskirts of the civilian settlement, but they were alive. They had made it. The battle wasn't over, but they had survived. For now, the crash landing was chaotic, the ship slamming into the surface with an earth-shaking impact. Alex's body was thrown forward, but his training kicked in, and he managed to stabilize himself, grabbing onto the seat in front of him just in time. The emergency lights flickered above them, casting an eerie red glow across the cabin as the ship groaned and sputtered, still struggling to remain intact. Alex's heart raced, adrenaline still coursing through his veins as he turned to check on Vera. She was shaken, her face pale, but she was alive. Her breathing was rapid, but steady. Are you okay? Alex asked, his voice urgent as he unstrapped himself from his seat. Vera nodded, a shaky breath escaping her lips. I'm fine, she replied, though her hands trembled slightly as she wiped away a tear. Alex could see the fear in her eyes, the uncertainty of what had just happened. He reached over and gently placed his hand on her shoulder, offering a brief, reassuring squeeze. We've made it this far. We'll make it through this too, he said, trying to keep his voice calm. Vera looked at him, her eyes still filled with gratitude, but also a deep sense of worry. What now? She asked softly. Alex took a deep breath, glancing toward the cockpit. The crash had left the ship in shambles, and the communication systems were down. They were on their own, with no clear way of reaching out for help. We need to get out of here, Alex said firmly, his voice steady despite the situation. I'll go check the outside, make sure it's safe. Stay here and keep your head down. Vera nodded, her eyes wide but trusting. Alex moved quickly, checking the ship for any other signs of damage or danger. The hull was badly dented, and the ship's engines were barely functional, but they were alive, and that was what mattered. He opened the door, stepping outside and immediately surveying the area. The crash had taken them to the outskirts of a civilian settlement, a small colony nestled among the ruins of an ancient city. The area was eerily quiet, the smoke from the ship's wreckage rising into the sky. Alex could see no immediate signs of danger, but he wasn't about to take any chances. He crouched low, staying hidden behind the wreckage as he scanned the horizon for any movement. The silence felt heavy, unnatural. He knew the enemy was still out there, and they wouldn't stop until they had captured Vera. He had to move fast. After a few moments, Alex motioned for Vera to follow him. She emerged from the wreckage cautiously, her eyes scanning the surroundings as she kept close behind him. They made their way toward the settlement, staying low and moving as quietly as possible. The last thing they needed was to draw attention to themselves. As they approached the settlement, Alex's senses were on high alert. He could feel the tension building, his instincts telling him that something was off. They reached the outskirts of the settlement without incident, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He stopped, motioning for Vera to stay behind a stack of crates. "Stay here," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Vera nodded, holding her breath as she pressed herself against the crates. Alex moved ahead, staying low, his rifle ready. He crept through the settlement, moving between buildings and staying in the shadows. It wasn't long before he spotted movement up ahead, a group of armed soldiers, alien forces, patrolling the area. They were looking for something, or someone. Alex's heart skipped a beat. He motioned for Vera to stay put, then moved further into the settlement to get a better vantage point. The soldiers were talking in hushed tones, their weapons raised as they carefully scanned the area. Alex's mind raced as he formulated a plan. He needed to get them out of there, but he couldn't do it alone. He had to make contact with the locals, find someone who could help them. He waited, watching the soldiers until they moved further away, then quickly made his way back to Vera. "We're going to need help," Alex said, his voice low and urgent. Vera looked at him, her face filled with concern. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I mean, we can't do this on our own," Alex said, glancing around. "The alien forces are too close. We need to find someone in the settlement who can help us get to safety. But we have to move fast." Vera nodded, her expression hardening with determination. "Let's go," she said, her voice strong. They moved deeper into the settlement, sticking to the shadows and avoiding the patrols. The settlement seemed deserted, but the farther they went, the more they felt the weight of eyes on them. Alex's instincts were telling him that they weren't alone, that someone was watching them. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with an unexpected figure. A tall, rugged man, his clothes dirty and torn, stood in front of them. His eyes were hard, but there was a glimmer of recognition in them when he saw Vera. "You're the one they're after, aren't you?" the man said, his voice rough. Vera froze, her eyes wide with fear. "Who are you?" Alex asked, his hand instinctively going to his weapon. The man held up his hands. A gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "I know who you are, and I can help you. But you have to trust me." Vera and Alex exchanged a glance, the tension thick in the air. They had no choice. They needed help. "All right," Alex said, his voice cautious. "We'll trust you. For now." The man nodded and gestured for them to follow him. "Come with me," he said, turning to lead them deeper into the settlement. They had no idea what they were walking into, but for the first time in a long while, Alex felt a glimmer of hope. They weren't alone anymore. The man led Alex and Vera through the narrow, dimly lit streets of the settlement. The buildings, old and worn, seemed to lean toward them, casting long shadows in the fading light. Despite the quiet, Alex remained alert, constantly scanning their surroundings. Vera walked beside him, her pace slower now, but her eyes were focused, no longer filled with fear but determination. They had survived so much already, and now, the promise of safety was within reach. As they turned a corner, the man stopped in front of a modest, unmarked door. He glanced around quickly before motioning for them to enter. "Inside, quickly," he said, his voice low but urgent. Alex hesitated for a moment, but then followed the man in, pulling Vera close. The door shut behind them with a soft click, and the dim glow of a small lamp revealed the interior. A sparse, utilitarian room with a few chairs, a table, and an old data pad flickering on the far wall. The man turned to face them, his expression serious. "You're safe here for now, but you need to understand something," he began, his voice hardening. "This settlement is neutral ground. There are people here who want peace, but there are also those who are working for the enemy. You need to be careful who you trust." Alex nodded, his senses sharp. "We're not here to make enemies," he said, his eyes never leaving the man. "We just need to get Vera to safety." The man studied them both for a long moment, as if weighing his options. Then, finally, he spoke. "I can help you get to the underground network. They can get you out of here, but it's not going to be easy. You'll need to stay hidden, move fast, and be prepared for anything." Vera looked up at him, her voice quiet but resolute. "We don't have much time. The enemy will come looking for us. We need to act now." The man nodded grimly. "I know. We move tonight. But first, I need you to trust me." Vera met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. "We don't have a choice," she said. "We'll follow you. Just get us out of here." The man's lips twitched into a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "Good. Then let's get to work." He moved to the far side of the room, pulling open a hidden compartment in the wall and revealing a series of small, discrete communication devices. "These will help us stay in contact with the underground. You won't be able to use regular comms without being tracked, but these are secure." He handed them both a device, making sure they knew how to use it before slipping one into his own pocket. "We'll rendezvous with the underground at midnight. Until then, stay quiet, stay out of sight, and don't trust anyone outside of this room." Alex and Vera exchanged a glance. The weight of the mission ahead of them was clear, but they knew there was no turning back now. They had come this far, and they had to see it through. "Understood," Alex said, his voice steady. Vera nodded. "We're ready." As the man turned to leave, he paused at the door. "One last thing," he said, his voice low. "You may think that escaping will be the end of this, but the truth is, it's only the beginning. There are bigger forces at play, and you'll need to be ready for what comes next." With that, he slipped out, leaving Alex and Vera alone in the small room. The silence was deafening as Alex looked at Vera. "We've made it this far," he said, his voice soft but filled with conviction. "We're not stopping now." Vera met his gaze, her face set with determination. "No matter what happens, we're in this together." The room seemed to close in around them as the weight of their situation settled over them once again. But this time, there was no fear in Vera's eyes. There was only the will to survive, to fight, and to make it out alive. The next few hours passed in a blur as they prepared for what was to come. Alex double-checked their gear, ensuring that they had everything they would need for the journey ahead. Vera sat quietly, staring at the floor, lost in her thoughts. The quiet between them was comfortable, as if they were both preparing mentally for the challenge that lay ahead. Midnight came quickly, and as the clock ticked down, Alex could feel the tension in the air. They were about to take their first steps into a new world, one where every decision could mean life or death. The man returned promptly at the designated time, and without a word, he led them back out into the night. They moved quickly through the darkened streets, the only sounds the quiet shuffle of their feet and the distant hum of the planet's fading engines. They reached the rendezvous point, an old maintenance tunnel hidden beneath a crumbling building. The underground network was waiting. The door to the tunnel creaked open, and they stepped inside, their journey into the unknown beginning in earnest. Alex looked at Vera one last time before the door shut behind them. "We'll make it through this," he said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. Vera nodded, her face softening for a moment. "We will." And with that, they disappeared into the darkness, ready to face whatever came next.